Hi, I'm cooking with one simple recipe, putting you one step closer to better health. Today, it's tofu gnocchis. And this is a brilliant recipe from Chef Abbie Gellman, who also happens to be a registered dietitian. So thank you to Abbie for bringing this to us and to me, at least to my attention. I love this recipe. If you are new to tofu, this might be the place to start with it. If you are a regular user of tofu, great for you. Good job. Keep doing that, but add this one maybe to your recipe roundup. All right, so we are going to be making tofu gnocchi. If you've ever made gnocchi before, it's usually made with mashed potatoes. I almost never make mashed potatoes, so I never have them. So that means that I'm not making gnocchi from scratch, typically. But this recipe now has become a new favorite of mine, and it's probably my favorite way to use tofu. And I've cooked with tofu in many different ways. So I think that kind of says a lot about this particular recipe. And what I love about it is that everyone who has had it loves it too, and even kids, because you really would never know that there's tofu in it. So you don't have to tell anybody if that would make it more appealing. All right, so let's get started. It's really literally 3 ingredients. So we're starting with a full block of tofu, and what is this? This is 16 ounces. I have firm tofu. I drained it. You don't have to press it. I patted it with a paper towel a little bit just to get some of that extra moisture out, but you kind of need some of it to help form the dough. So it's just, this whole block, 16 ounces of tofu. Now there's a little extra water in here. Let me just pour that extra water out of there. All right, and then it's a cup of flour. And let me just check my water here. I have some water off here boiling, and I'm going to keep it boiling, because we're going to need to use that pretty quickly here. All right, so it's a cup of all-purpose flour. I am just not going to use whole wheat flour for this. You can, but I'm going to just use regular flour. And you know what I forgot to do? First step is you want to crumble up the tofu. So I'm going to move some of this off to the side. I'm ahead of myself. So you put the block of tofu in, which is fine. And now we're just going to crumble it up. My hands are nice and clean. We're going to be using your hands anyway to make the dough. And we're really just breaking this up so that it's in smaller pieces. And then we're going to work the flour into the dough. So I love using soy, and I know I work with clients, and a lot of my clients are a little bit nervous about adding soy to their diet. And this really just comes from back in the early 90s. I don't know, there's one study that was not a very good study, but it was one of these studies that it ended up sticking, that said that there's some risk with soy and breast cancer, which is really done in mice, or even, I might even just been even in test tubes. But since then, they've really looked at the research, and they pretty much are in agreement that soy is actually beneficial for reducing the risk of breast cancer. So I love adding things like tofu to my diet, particularly because it's a great source of plant protein. And it's naturally high in those isoflavones, which are plant compounds that are pretty protective in the world of even like cancer risk reduction and for cardiovascular health to some extent. So it's a nice addition, and when you're eating tofu, that means you're probably not eating red meat. So it's just a great swap out. All right, so I just broke this up. I'm going to add, because I went ahead of myself, I'm going to add about a half a teaspoon of salt. And now I'm just going to mix this all together. So we're just, get in there with your hands. We're going to continue to sort of break this up a little bit. Basically, we're just forming this gnocchi dough. And then we're going to roll it out into like a little bit of a cylinder and cut it into the shapes. This is so easy. I mean, this is definitely a weeknight friendly meal to make, and it's great for the whole family. Like I said, kids are going to love this because they're little crispy nuggets that they're not going to know. And the idea here is that, with tofu, it has such a neutral flavor. It doesn't have a whole lot. So it's just going to be it's just there for the protein basically and the texture. And then you're going to mix this, or you can serve it as is with just sprinkles of Parmesan cheese and maybe even a little basil or fresh herbs, which is delicious, just like that. But basically, you're going to want to probably just put sauce on it, whatever sauce you like, whether it's pesto, whether it's a marinara, however you want to do it. All right, it is pretty sticky, but what I'm going to do is, let me try to think here. I need to wash my hands because I'm going to have to get right back in here. Let me just move this off to the side. I'm going to flour my counter just a little bit. You don't really have to necessarily. It doesn't always stick, but just to be on the safe side, I think I will flour it. So let me move this off. So I'm just going to take a little more flour and just put it out here. Make sure my hands are drier. Now you're going to work with this in little batches, and we're basically going to make a log out of it. So I'm just, forming it with my hands. And you could break this up. I probably could break this tofu up a little bit smaller because I added the flour too soon. So basically you want to put your tofu into your bowl, break it up, and then add your flour, and then continue to work with it. Okay, so let me just move some flour around here. And now I'm just going to form this into, and you're cutting this into about, I don't know, I don't think it really matters, but I think they're probably about 1-inch little gnocchi size nuggets that we're going to be creating. So we're just going to you're kind of pressing it together because it does want to kind of break apart a little bit, but it will, that's fine. You can just kind of piece it back together. Let me just see if I can get this just a little bit. My hands are really a little sticky here. A little bit more. Like I said, with this, I should have probably had the tofu a little bit more broken up, but that's fine. I think it will work just as well. All right, so here it is. All right, now we're gonna just take something to cut it with, and I just have this bench scraper. And I'm gonna just cut it into these little 1-inch, give or take, size pieces. And then these are gonna go into boiling water. All right, so here we have them. And then I'm only going to do a few so that you can just see this, and then I'll finish this batch later. This is for, this is just with the 1 pack of tofu. When I'm making this, sometimes I probably want to double the recipe because if you're making, you might as well make a bunch and then you'll have them. So I'm going to turn my saute pan on because we are going to saute them. You don't have to, but I like them that way. Okay, so they're boiling. I'm just going to drop these in, and they're going to float. They're going to sink to the bottom, and then when they float back up to the surface, that's when you know they're done. So I'm going to pop them in. That only takes probably 2 or 3 minutes. We'll just see how it goes. So they're in there, and then I think what I'll do is let me just I have some tongs here. Let me whip these tongs. I'm just going to move them around. You don't want them to sink to the bottom. You don't want them to stick to the bottom, which I don't think they're going to. And they look like they're pretty good. They're just sitting around and floating around in there, but they're still on the bottom. So we'll give it to a chance for them to come to the surface. All right. So like I said, I'm just going to do a quick little batch here for you so that you can see how quickly these kind of come together. And then I'll finish these up. I'll finish the rest of this up later, but basically it's the same thing. You're just going to take a little bit at a time, just so it's just enough to make it so it's workable, and then keep cutting them. Now, what I haven't done yet with these, so just move them around a little bit. They're kind of clustering together here. All right, they want to touch each other in the face. They want to come together. Okay, they haven't floated to the surface yet, but they should soon. All right, so I did spray a nonstick pan. I think it's better to use nonstick and I'm just going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil in there, because if you try to saute these in a pan that's not nonstick, 2 things you have to do. You have to make sure that your pan is really hot. So if you're using like a cast iron skillet, make sure it's really hot and the oil is hot before you add them. Because they do want to stick. So I just prefer to do a non-stick pan, makes it a little bit easier. And then, okay, so I've got 1 or 2 that are starting to come to the surface. So when I bring them out, I'll show you, and that's how we know that they're done. Now with these, you could just boil them and then throw them in a saute pan without browning them, then toss them with your marinara sauce and your cheese, whatever you want to do with them. You don't have to brown them, or you don't have to saute them. I just think it adds a neat texture and it makes them a little crispier. And when I made these, the last time I made these, we didn't eat them. I didn't put any sauce on them. And the only thing I did was put some Parmesan cheese on top, which I think I'm going to do today. And I just had them, and we just kept eating them as like a little snack because they were just good just like that. Okay, looks like they're coming up, so that's how quickly. Now I just have a plate that's lined with a paper towel because although Abbie didn't do this, she just pulled them out and just put them in a bowl before she put them into the saute pan. But I kind of like to drain them a little bit on the paper towel just so they're not so wet. All right, let me just get this out. Just so they're not so wet. And when they go into the saute pan, so that's the only reason I am doing that. So here they are, all right? So they're I'm not going to call them pillowy because they're not really pillowy. It's not, like if sometimes I think if you're really, I'm not an expert at making gnocchis by any means, but I think sometimes that's the goal, is to kind of have them really light and pillowy and fluffy. These are a little bit, these have a lot like texture to them, which I actually prefer because it's kind of nice to have them not so soft. All right, so I'm going to let them drain a little bit until this pan comes up. So if you're not using tofu currently in your diet, it's really, I would highly encourage you to do that. You know, again, it's a great source of plant protein, as I mentioned, and really good plant compounds. It's coming up with different ways to use it. I've made tofu scramble. I think we even did one on Facebook Live as a substitute for scrambled eggs. You can make a tofu eggless salad. So basically you're making it just like you're making egg salad, but instead of eggs, you're using tofu. And you're breaking it up almost to this consistency. And then you're adding everything you would normally add to egg salad. A recipe that I just tested last night, which I really liked a lot, it was crispy tofu nuggets that were, you know, like a replacement for chicken nuggets. And I think I can smell that this is getting, okay, so these are going in. You can hear that little sizzle, which is what you want. So let's put these in. Anyway, there were these tofu nuggets, and they were really, really, really good. You did them in the oven. It was like a really neat little seasoning coating of, basically, and I'm going to bring this recipe to you once I perfect it a little bit more, but it was basically some flour, nutritional yeast, onion and garlic powder, salt, little pepper, and you were, that was the kind of what you used as a coating, and then you put the little chicken, you take the tofu and you tear it up into kind of pieces that are real craggly, you know, you're not cutting the tofu, which gives you a little more surface area to get crispy, and you coat them in this, you know, seasoned mixture, and they went into a hot oven, and they were great. They tasted really good. It's just that I think I wanted them a little crispier, so I think I would do this method. So that's another idea, is like to take your tofu, break it up maybe into 1-inch sized pieces that has a little bit more craggly of an edge, then maybe toss it with a little bit of seasoned flour, and then pan saute them maybe in a little bit of, I would spray first, then put some olive oil in just to make sure that they don't stick. But that is another way to do them, and they are great. They were really good. The texture was great. I think, again, that would be a nice thing to do with the tofu, even for kids, because it does remind you of the chicken nuggets. And then it's just your favorite dipping sauce, whether it's ketchup or honey mustard, or you're going to make a sauce for it. Okay. All right, so we have this. These are, and I can see they're crisping up and they're browning, so that's good. I'm going to give them a few more minutes. And then I'm just going to flip them over, and then that's the whole point here, is we're just trying to get them crispy. Now what I am going to add here, let me just grab my Parmesan cheese. I had a huge wedge of Parmesan cheese from Costco, so I just put it through my food processor, so now it's in this huge jar. But once I flip them, I am going to add some Parmesan cheese for like 30 seconds to a minute at the end. So it'll melt on top, but then it'll also, the Parmesan cheese will crisp a little bit at the bottom of the pan, which makes, again, that really kind of, it just adds to the texture. All right, so let's see if these are sticking. No, they're not. Good. I'm going to flip them, and they are nice and brown. I'll bring it over to show you. You have to make sure that your pan is, again, nice and hot. If you're going to use a non-stick pan, you're definitely going to probably need to spray it with some cooking spray as well as add some oil. When you're using a non-stick, you don't have to use quite as much oil. All right, so you can see how nice and crispy brown that got. All right, so let's let these go for a little bit longer. So on our recipe site, judymatusky.com, there are a lot of tofu-based recipes. Even other recipes using maybe edamame, or I have a few with tempeh. But there are quite a few. So if you're interested, and they're usually, most of them, again, are pretty simple. You could, jump over there and print them out, and then you'll have the recipes to try. If you have a way that you love to cook with tofu, put it in the comments section. Some of you have been so great about putting in comments. I love that. So any recipe ideas that you have for me, I would love. So just let me know how you might be cooking with tofu as well. All right, so this is good. I'm only going to do them, again, maybe a minute here on. And then I'm going to just take a little bit of this Parmesan cheese right now, and I'm going to sprinkle it right on top, just so it melts. And then it'll start to crisp up here on the bottom. All right, I'm going to turn it off heat right now, too. All right. Let me take that off. So here they are. So here are our crispy, actually I can just move them to this plate. Our crispy tofu gnocchis, or nuggets, little nuggets, that are amazing. I can't tell you how good these are. I just like this. I don't even need to put any sauce on them. You may want to, like I said, that's up to you. But just like this, and then here's all the little Parmesan, crispy Parmesan pieces that are sticking to the satchel. I'm going to add those right to the plate. All right, and then maybe just a little crushed brown pepper. And here they are. I mean, aren't that great? I mean, literally, it took 2 seconds. The longest part is to just roll out the tofu into the cylinders and cut them. But other than that, it's just super, super simple. All right, give this a try. And again, as always, if you do, please let me know. I really appreciate that. Next week, we're going to start, the whole month of October is going to be one simple recipe using apples. Because, of course, it's apple season right now. We just picked some. We didn't pick. We went to a farm near our cabin and just got a whole bunch of fantastic apples. And there's just nothing better than apples that are coming fresh off the tree, right? So this is the time to get them. If you're not using apples, please do. And I'm gonna bring you a whole bunch of really fast and easy and healthy recipes and different ways to use them. All right, stay healthy, stay well, and I will see you next week with a really fun recipe. It's going to be apple palm pies. So there's these little individual apple pies that are actually delicious and healthy. How about that? All right, see you next week. Bye-bye.